Friends, here comes the question. Is the Constitution of India is only a rule book, or it is also a vision of our country? We understood earlier that Constitution provides Parliament, Executive and Judiciary, and then give power to these institutions and put some restrictions over these power. Is that the end of constitutional story? So answer is no. Because once power has been created and limited, another question immediately arises. That for what purpose that power should be used? Should the government remain satisfied merely because an action is legally possible? Or must public power also move society towards justice, protect liberty, expand equality, respect dignity, and strengthen fraternity? Friends, this is where constitutional philosophy begins. Lecture 1 gave us a basic vocabulary. Lecture 2 taught us that power must be lawful, limited, and accountable. Today, we take the next step. The Constitution does not merely create and restrain the power. It gives that power a social and moral direction. Constitution सिर्फ ये नहीं बताता कि सरकार क्या कर सकती है और क्या नहीं कर सकती. Constitution ये भी बताता है कि पब्लिक पावर को किस डायरेक्शन में काम करना चाहिए, किस पर्पस के लिए काम करना चाहिए. So friends, our today's question is not merely who has power. It is what kind of society should constitutional power help us build. So friends, let us begin exactly where lecture 2 ended. Constitutionalism tells us that public power should be restricted. No government, majority, legislature, public authority, executive, or any institution can become constitutionally unlimited. But friends, limitation alone is not the complete philosophy of our Indian Constitution. Imagine a bus. Rules tell the driver who may drive, what speed is allowed, which side of the road to use, and what safety limits are applied. These rules are necessary. But friends, the bus also has to have a destination. Similarly, the constitutionalism give discipline to our constitution, and constitutional philosophy give purpose and direction to our constitution. Friends, this distinction is very important. A government may follow correct procedures and still pursue the policies which deepen exclusions, ignore dignity, or leave structural inequality untouched. Constitutional government, therefore, requires both legality and the constitutional purpose. In simple terms, limits answer how may power be exercised, and values answer towards what public purpose the power should move. Friends, the beauty is that the Indian Constitution combines both. It restrains arbitrary power and it directs democratic power towards a more just social order. In this chapter, we need to understand a central theme. The Constitution authorizes the government, limits government, protects the people, and directs towards the social justice. And this is why it is called that the Indian Constitution is both restraining and transformative. Friends, do not confuse these two dimensions. Restraint prevents misuse, and transformation addresses inherited injustice. One protects the society from excessive power, and other enables public power to correct deep inequalities through constitutional methods. Friends, now let us define constitutional philosophy. It means the coherent set of values, purposes, and assumptions that explain that what constitution is trying to build, protect, and transform. Constitutional philosophy especially explains the value, purposes, and directions behind the framework. Friends, every constitution has an underlying philosophy, even when value is not written in one place. But the constitutional choices reveals it, such as who is treated as citizen, where does authority comes from, are rulers accountable, are rights protected, is social hierarchy is accepted or challenged, is the state neutral among the religions, how are liberty and public order managed. Friends, you need to understand that these are not value-free questions. You need to understand that the Indian Constitution is not clearly value neutral. It does not merely organizes the offices. It creates and distributes public power protect rights and deliberately challenge the colonial subordination, arbitrary rule, and inherited structure of exclusion. Our constitution recognizes the people of this nation as a source of power and promises equal civic status, protect liberty, direct the states towards justice, and place dignity at the center of the citizenship, and seeks unity without demanding the cultural uniformity. And this is what the beauty of our Indian Constitution. Friends, when I say not value neutral, I do not mean that the Constitution provide one ready-made answer to every political disagreement. Here you need to understand that constitutional values may pull in different directions. Liberty and public order may conflict at many times. Equality may require both equal treatment and special measures. Development may create questions of displacement and dignity. And here, government often required the approach of balancing. And you know what? Our constitution provides that framework of balancing. It tells us that which value should remain in the conversation and tells us which constitutional method must be followed. So friends, constitutional philosophy is not a decorative introduction. It is an interpretive compass. It helps us to understand that why institution exists, why right matters, why procedures must be fair, and why governance must fulfill the public purpose rather than private power. यहाँ कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल फिलॉसफी का मतलब है कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन के पीछे की सोच, समाज कैसा हो, नागरिक की क्या डिग्निटी हो, पावर का सोर्स क्या हो और स्टेट किस डायरेक्शन में काम करे. फ्रेंड्स, now we come to our opening words. We, the people of India. Now we have to understand that why do these words matter? Because they tells us that from where the ultimate constitutional authority is coming from. What is the source of this constitutional authority? Friends, the constitution is not presented as a gift by any monarch or by a colonial power or by any parliament. It is adopted and given by the people of India through a constitution making process. And this idea is called popular sovereignty, which means that public authority derives its legitimacy directly from the people. But be careful, popular sovereignty does not mean that every governmental decisions must be taken directly by all citizens. And at the same time, it does not authorizes unlimited majority rule. Friends, India is a representative constitutional democracy. Here, elections operates together with rights, courts, rule of law, institutions, and accountability. The people of this country create constitutional authority, and these institutions exercise that authority within constitutional limits. So here, the sequence of constitutional authority is people, constitution, institutions, and public power. And this is why in India, public office is not a private property. A minister, a judge, a civil servant, or elected representative occupies a constitutional or a legal office. Public office is a trust. Authority belongs to the office, but it exists for public purposes and remain accountable to constitutional processes and standards. Friends, let us take a simple example. A district collector may possess a significant public authority, but that authority does not come from personal status. It comes from law, institutional office, and the constitutional order. That officer is a trustee of public power, not its owner. Friends, here we need to understand one very important concept. We the people also makes a historical transition. Under the colonial rule, Indians were governed as subject of imperial authority, and here the constitutional order recognizes the people as the citizen of this country, the participant in the public authority, holders of rights, and equal member of public community. However, we need to understand citizenship is not only the right to vote. Here, the constitutional citizenship means equal status, liberty, duties, participation, respect for people, and the capacity to hold a public power accountable. Friends, here for mains examination, use this line. Popular sovereignty is constitutional, not unbounded. The people govern through institutions and processes created by the Constitution. Even democratic power remains subject to constitutional values. Friends, now let us discuss the value cluster of constitutional philosophy. And the first value cluster is justice, that is social, economic, and political. And here the question comes, why three forms of justice? So here we need to understand that injustice does not arise only from one source. A person may possesses the formal right to vote and still face social exclusions. A person may be equal before law and still lacks real access to education, livelihood, or public institutions. A society may hold elections regularly and yet deny equal political voice to the disadvantaged group of our society. Friends, let us take them one by one. This social justice means transforming the social relations that deny equal dignity and membership. It addresses the status-based exclusion, discrimination, untouchability, entrenched hierarchy, and barriers created by birth or social identity. Friends, here you need to understand one very important thing, that social justice is not simply a charity from the powerful to the weak. Instead, it is a constitutional claim that every person belongs to a political community with equal dignity. Friends, here economic justice concerns fair conditions in economic life. But be careful, it does not mean that the Constitution promises identical income for every person. It means that extreme deprivation, exploitative conditions, and structural inequalities cannot be ignored by the constitutional state. We can understand by few examples of creating the below poverty line, identifying the people living below to the poverty line, and then further creating schemes such as Manrega and many other welfare schemes to uplift these people from below poverty line to above poverty line to live a life with some economic gains and dignity. We will understand this topic with more clarity in upcoming lectures. But here you need to remember one simple thing, that public policy must work towards fair opportunity, livelihood, welfare, and conditions in which freedom and equality become meaningful. Friends, here political justice means equal political membership. Every citizen must have an equal political voice. Public offices should not be the hereditary privilege of a class. Elections must be meaningful, and citizens must be able to participate, question, and hold government accountable. Friends, here is the center point. Political democracy by itself may be fragile if social and economic inequalities make equal citizenship merely formal. Let's take an example. Suppose two citizens both possesses one vote. Now here, formally their political status is equal, but one is socially excluded, economically dependent, and unable to access the institutions. Now here, can we say that democratic citizenship has become fully meaningful? Not yet. And friends, this is why justice in the Indian Constitution is having multi-dimensional vision. Social justice asks, are people treated as equal members? Economic justice asks, do material conditions permit a dignified life and fair opportunity? And political justice asks, can people participate equally in collective power? Friends, these three are connected to each other. The social hierarchy can weaken economic opportunity. Economic deprivation can weaken political participation. And political exclusion can preserve social and economic injustice. And therefore, justice is not one isolated slogan. It is a constitutional direction to law, policy and institutions. सिर्फ वोट मिल जाना पॉलिटिकल जस्टिस का एक पार्ट है, लेकिन अगर सामाजिक भेदभाव और इकोनॉमिक डिप्रावेशन इतना गहरा हो कि व्यक्ति अपने राइट्स, अपने अधिकार यूज ही न कर सके, तो डेमोक्रेसी का प्रॉमिस अधूरा रह जाता है। फ्रेंड्स, आवर नेक्स्ट वैल्यू क्लस्टर is liberty and dignity. Liberty of thought, expression, belief, faith and worship. Here, liberty protects the inner and public life of a person. It allows citizens to think, speak, believe, disagree, choose and develop their personality without unnecessary dominations. Friends, here is the question. Why does the preamble begins with thought and expression? Because the democratic citizenship requires more than physical freedom. You need to understand here that citizens must be able to form their opinions, communicate their ideas, criticize authority, and participate in public reasoning. Friends, belief, faith, and worship recognizes another dimension of human personality. A constitutional state does not own the consciences of the citizen. But here one need to be careful. Liberty is not same as the license. The constitutional liberty exists with responsibility and lawful limitations. Friends, the detailed nature of rights and restrictions will come later. Today, remember this conceptual principle that restrictions over liberty cannot be based merely on dislike, prejudice or political convenience. They require constitutional justification. Now let's connect liberty with dignity. Dignity means that every individual possesses intrinsic worth and must not be treated merely as an object, instrument or subordinate subject of state or society. Liberty gives a person space to choose and dignity explains why that space matters. Friends, imagine a government service that is technically available to everyone but humiliates certain applicants because of caste, gender, disability, language or poverty. The problem is not only an inefficient service delivery, it is also a constitutional failure of dignity and equality. Friends, dignity therefore connects equality, liberty and justice. A person without liberty may be controlled. A person without equality may be treated as inferior. A person without material security may be unable to live with dignity. Friends, now let us understand equality. The preamble in our Indian Constitution promises equality of status and opportunity. Here, equality of status means equal civic worth. Now, what does it mean? It means that no citizen is constitutionally born to rule the nation and no citizen is constitutionally born to obey. Here, social identity cannot determine the basic value of a person in political community, and equality of opportunity means that access to education, public employment, political participation and social advancement should not be blocked by unjust barriers. But here we need to be very careful because students often make one mistake. They equate equality with identical treatment in every situation. But here, understand this very carefully. Equality does not always mean or require the state to treat differently situated people in exactly the same way. Friends, sometimes equal citizenship requires the removal of historical or structural barriers. And here, this is the beginning of the idea of substantive equality, which we will study deeply under the right to equality and social justice in later lecture. And right now, use this simple analogy. Suppose a building gives a same staircase to everyone and says, we have treated everyone equally, but a person using wheelchair still cannot enter the building. So here, formal sameness exists, but real opportunity does not. Friends, here in the context of Indian Constitution, the constitutional question is not only was the same rule applied, it is also did the rule create or preserve an unfair barrier. And at the same time, equality is not a blank check for arbitrary classifications or unlimited preferences. Friends, constitutional equality requires justification, fairness, and connections with legitimate objectives. So here, remember three distinctions. Equality is not uniformity. Equal opportunity is not mere permission on paper. The substantive equality is not the abandonment of fairness. In fact, it is a deeper account of fairness. Friends, for May's perspective, remember this line. The Constitution moves from equal treatment as a formal rule towards equal citizenship as a substantive condition. Friends, now let's discuss fraternity, dignity, unity, and integrity. Friends, fraternity is often the least understood preamble value, but it may be the value that holds all other values together. Here, fraternity means a constitutional sense of common belongings, a recognition that people who belongs to the different region, religion, language, caste, gender, culture, or political opinion remain equal member of one political community. And here we need to understand that fraternity is not forced sameness and unity is not uniformity. Friends, a democratic nation and a diversified nation like India cannot be held together only by police power, legal command, or administrative control. It also requires mutual recognition, mutual respect, the willingness to accept that another citizen, even when different and dissenting, and need to understand that also had equal rights, equal dignity, and equal claim to the nation. This is why the preamble connects fraternity with two outcomes. First, the dignity of the individual, and second, the unity and integrity of the nation. Friends, here we need to understand one important thing, that individual dignity and national unity are not enemies to each other. Our Indian Constitution's vision is that the unity becomes durable when an individual is treated with dignity. Understand it in this way. If a society, if a community wants unity by humiliating minorities, suppressing differences, or imposing cultural uniformity, then it may create obedience, it may create discipline, but not fraternity. And conversely, if citizens enjoy liberty but refuse any sense of common responsibility, then social trust may collapse. Friends, Dr. Ambedkar emphasized that liberty, equity, and fraternity form an independent union. Take it in this way. Liberty without equality permit domination. Equality without liberty can suppress individuality. And friends, both liberty and equality without fraternity can remain external rules rather than a shared democratic way of living life. Now here the question is, can a country remain united if a large group of that country feels that they are legally present but socially unwanted? Friends, the constitutional answer is clear. The unity must be created through equal citizenship, dignity and fraternity. यहाँ fraternity का मतलब सिर्फ भाईचारा नहीं है, इसका मतलब बहुत डीप हमारे कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन के अंदर लिया गया है, और वो ये है कि हम सब एक दूसरे से अलग अलग होते हुए भी हम सब इक्वल सिटीजन हैं और इस देश पर हम सब का बराबर अधिकार है. Constitution ensures here that each and every citizen of this country has equal right on this country, on this constitution. Constitution doesn't allow anyone to claim that I am this and that is why I am a true citizen of this country and this country belongs to be more. Friends, now let us understand the constitutional morality. the constitutional morality is a discipline of exercising public power and citizenship according to the constitutional values, rights, institutional limits, dignity, and rule of law. It requires fidelity to the Constitution's methods. Friends, merely mechanical use of constitutional power does not make any sense. It requires the faithfulness of constitutional methods, roles, and spirit of restraint. Let's understand it in this way. Suppose an institution possesses a legal power. Now here, constitutional morality asks, is the power being used for constitutional purposes? Is the institution respecting the legitimate role of other institutions? Are reasons being given? Is dissent being tolerated? Are rights and dignity being considered? And is the action consistent with the larger constitutional order? Therefore, constitutional morality requires more than technical legality. It is the ethical discipline of constitutional democracy. Here we need to understand the constitutional values must shape constitutional conduct. Friends, now let us distinguish the constitutional morality from the social morality. This social morality refers to belief and practices widely accepted by the society at a particular time. And these social norms may be humane and may be compatible with the constitutional norms. But friends, they also may preserve exclusions, patriarchy, caste hierarchy, stigma, or intolerance. Whereas constitutional morality provides a public standard against which social practices can be examined. Friends, here we need to understand very carefully that popular acceptance alone does not make a social practice constitutionally valid. But another caution is very important. Constitutional morality is not whatever a judge, government, or any commentator personally consider morality desirable. It must be as per the Constitution. It must be in the Constitution, in its text, structure, right, institutions, values, and democratic commitment. So friends, write this distinction. Social morality asks that what does society presently approve? And constitutional morality asks that what does equal constitutional citizenship requires? Friends, the constitutional morality is especially important in a diverse country like India because the constitution must protect both the democratic choice and the individual liberty of a person who may be unpopular and marginalized. Friends, here for mains, avoid vague writing. Use 4 components for the constitutional morality. First, constitutional values. Second, constitutional methods. Third, institutional restraints. And fourth, equal citizenship. And remember, the detailed constitutional morality and Supreme Court judgments come later in the lecture. Here, we are trying to build the conceptual foundation. Friends, let us discuss now the transformative dimension of our Indian Constitution. We need to understand that India did not inherit an equal social order in 1950. It inherited colonial institutions, mass poverty, caste hierarchy, untouchability, gender inequality, communal trauma, low literacy, and deep social exclusions. Friends, the Constitution merely did not change the ruler. It sought to change the relationship between the state, society, and the citizenship. Friends, we need to understand that a constitution designed only to prevent a government and its interferences would have been inadequate. India also required public institutions which are capable of expanding democracy, correcting inherited injustice, and building conditions for equal citizenship. And this is why the Indian Constitution is not only the shield against the state. It is also a democratic instrument through which the state must pursue justice. But remember, within the constitutional limits. Friends, this is very important. That transformation does not mean that Constitution promises instant perfection. कोई जादू की छड़ी नहीं कि घुमाया और काम हो गया. And at the same time, it does not authorizes unlimited state power in the name of reform. Constitutional transformations must remain democratic, lawful, rights respecting and accountable. Friends, here think of two movements operating together. The first movement is from arbitrary power to the limited government, and the second movement is from unequal social status to equal constitutional citizenship. Remember this in this way, that this is the transition from colonial subject to the constitutional citizen. In a colonial rule, a subject receives command from the ruler. But here, a citizen is the source of public authority in our Indian Constitution, a holder of rights, a participant in governance, and an equal member of a political community. Friends, the constitutional transformation seeks to make the equal citizenship real in everyday life. Let it be anywhere, a police station, a court, any office of a public authority, election booth, and delivery of public services. Let us take a government example. A welfare scheme may be legally authorized and budgeted, but if access to the scheme depends on humiliation, discrimination, or arbitrary discretion, then the scheme will fail the constitutional value, even if it may exist in the system. So here we need to understand, friends, that the good governance not only asks that was money spent, it also asks, was the process fair? Did the most vulnerable gain access? Was dignity respected? Were reasons recorded? Was grievance redress available? And this is why constitutional values are important in administration. They convert public offices into constitutional trust. So friends, I hope that you understood today's lecture. This is all for right now. We will meet in the next lecture. Till then, goodbye.